Hello, my friends. D.L. Anderson here. Welcome back to Transformation by Truth podcast as we share the truth concerning these last days and what you must do to save yourself from the violent times that are just ahead. Today's podcast is a word of truth accounting of the end times. The end is coming. The end is near. Today's podcast is entitled End Times 284, the sequence of the sealing of these set apart ones, part 1. The podcast objectives are harden the value of the message of the sealing, reveal the 7 main events of the sealing, analyze the first and second main events of the sealing, and reveal why it's better late than never to be sealed. This lesson contains timelines and other visuals. Therefore, if you are listening to the podcast, I advise you to watch the video version on our website or YouTube, or request a PDF of the lesson so you can add the visual effect. The only message of enduring value. Now, in the most recent podcast, we analyzed the messengers of the sealing. In doing so, we came to see how the true messengers of Elohim are focused on preparing the renewed nation of Israel for the sifting of the nations. If you recall, the sifting of the nation marks the beginning of the Great Distress. That is, the combination of the sifting of the nations, the destruction of Mystery Babel, and the day of Yahuwah. As you can see by the timeline below, these are the 3rd, 4th, and 5th seasons in these last days. Now, the critical factor in our preparations for these seasons is sure, and we have discussed this matter many times in prior podcasts. Explicitly, the violence and destruction in those seasons will claim the lives of approximately 6 billion men, women, and children. Now, these casualties will, no doubt, include individuals from many nations all over this world. This includes the extended nation of Israel. Here is why. Yahuwah Elohim is the one who is orchestrating the Great Distress. It is why the climax of this time is the day of Yahuwah, i.e., the 5th season in these last days. For this cause, the primary executors of the wrath of Elohim during the Great Distress will be the angels of death. And here is the most important thing to note. These angels have been given a simple command, that is, to kill all and all alike, except for those who have the seal of Elohim. Lo, this is why the message of the sealing is as simple as it is sure. And this is why we, all the true messengers of the sealing, have been consistent in our proclamations. It's because we know what is coming. And in some cases, we have seen it. And so you must hear me when I say, words can never do justice to the terror and horror of the Great Distress, specifically for those who do not have the seal of Elohim. And that, my friends, is the only message of enduring value in this season. And you will hear me proclaiming it until this season has come to an end. The 7 main events of the sealing. Now, this declaration brings us to the question of the hour, namely, when will this season come to an end? Now, although we know it will be soon, we cannot tell the day nor the hour. Neither can we calculate the month or the year. Notwithstanding, we do know the sequence of the sealing of these set apart ones. To wit, we know the major events that will happen in this season. And thus, by observing these events, we can tell how close we are getting to the end. If you recall, sequence is the fifth of the 7 guidelines for every word of prophecy. And it is one of the last 2 we must address to prove the sealing of these set apart ones is an authentic prophetic event in these last days. Along these lines, the sequence reveals how a prophecy will happen. It is the order of the events, i.e., the signs within the prophecy. For the remainder of this podcast, we will analyze the sequence of the sealing of these set apart ones as we had done for the restoration of the nation in October 2023. Now, if you recall, I dedicated 5 podcasts to analyzing the sequence of the restoration of the nation of Israel. Yet, due to the urgency of this hour, the Spirit has constrained me to analyze the sequence of the sealing in only 3. So, buckle up, my friends, buckle up. We have a lot of ground to cover, and we only have a short amount of time. Now, the timeline below reveals the 7 major events associated with the sealing of these set apart ones, which I have appropriately labeled as the day of salvation. Here again, we will cover each of these 7 major events over the course of the next 3 podcasts. And these 7 events are the call to walk in the way of holiness. The renewed nation of Israel turns away from lawlessness. The great falling away. The renewed covenant is established. Yahuwah prepares the nation for the great distress. The call to flee mystery Babel. And last but not least, the second great Exodus. To walk in the way of holiness. Now, per the timeline below, the first major event in this season is the call to walk in the way of holiness. Here is how we know this event has already transpired. The call to walk in the way of holiness is equated to the call for those who heard the restoration message to become doers of the word that was delivered to them. For this is the intent of the restoration message, that we should be holy as Yahuwah Elohim is holy. Here lies the inflection, vis-a-vis, we do not become holy by hearing the restoration message. Quite the contrary, we become holy by doing the restoration message, fulfilling every line and precept of the Torah of perfection in the spirit of obedient faith. Now, the fact that the call to holiness is the first event in this season is one of many pieces of evidence Yahuwah has called me to minister on his behalf in this season. For when I launched this podcast, a year into this season of sealing, the Spirit led me to establish this ministry upon Isaiah 35, 8 through 10. And Isaiah 35, 8 through 10 reads, "And there shall be a highway and a way, and it shall be called the way of holiness. The unclean does not pass over it, but it is for those who walk the way, and no fools wander on it. but the redeemed shall walk there, and the ransomed of Yahuwah shall return and enter Zion with singing, with everlasting joy on their heads. They shall obtain joy and gladness, and sorrow and sighing shall flee away. Now, if you've paid close attention, you will see this verse is highlighted at the beginning and at the conclusion of every podcast I've created since 2021, because it makes a direct connection between the way of holiness and those who will inherit the renewed promised land. This is why I don't argue or debate with individuals who have fabricated non-scriptural basis for salvation in these last days. Explicitly, those who think they will be ransomed by Yahuwah because they are physical descendants of Jacob. These individuals should actually read the prophets, specifically Isaiah 35:8, which tells us that the unclean cannot walk in the way of holiness. Ergo, those who operate in lawlessness and do not guard the commands of Elohim will not be ransomed. They will not enter the renewed promised land. I don't care what DNA is in their bodies, and neither does Yahuwah, the Most High Elohim. For look, listen, it has been written, see, all souls are mine. The soul that is sinning shall die. This is the word of Elohim, and he cannot lie. Isaiah 59:19-20 reads, and they shall fear the name of Yahuwah from the west, and his esteem from the rising of the sun. When the enemy comes like a flood, the spirit of Yahuwah shall lift up a standard against him. And the Redeemer shall come to Zion, and to those turning from transgression and Jacob, declares Yahuwah. Now, there are several key takeaways in this passage. Most notably, we are guaranteed that the enemy is coming like a flood. For Isaiah doesn't say if the enemy comes like a flood. Quite the contrary. He hath said when the enemy comes like a flood. This speaks to the next takeaway, vis-a-vis the spirit of Yahuwah Elohim will lift a standard against him. And it is this standard that will drive at the enemy, pushing him back into his place. Now, this truth brings us to the million-dollar question, the question of the hour, and perhaps the most important question in this podcast. The question, what standard does Yahuwah Elohim lift against the enemy when he comes like a flood? The answer, holiness. We know this because of the scriptural context applied to the word standard. As crucial and revelatory as this matter is, I will offer it as a revelation. The word standard in Isaiah 59:19 is used in the context of chasing away by the essence and the rage of Elohim. Now, we can easily tie these 3 points of context to holiness. First, we know the essence of Yahuwah is holiness, for thus he has commanded, be ye holy, for I am holy. Likewise, when Isaiah saw Yahuwah on his throne, the seraphim around him cried, holy, holy, holy is Yahuwah of hosts. All the earth is filled with his esteem. Next, we understand the rage factor has to deal with lawlessness, for it is written, Elohim is a righteous judge, and El is enraged with the wicked every day. And thus, by his spirit, he drives at the lawlessness in our beings with his holiness until every degree of lawlessness fades away. My dear friends, this is how Yahuwah's standard of holiness chases away the enemy. For the enemy will not abide with you if you are walking in the way of holiness. The same way, light and darkness cannot occupy the same allotment of spiritual or physical space. The enemy can do nothing against Yahuwah's standard of holiness and those who are walking in it. Brothers and sisters, this is the summation of this revelation and why the first major event we witnessed in this season of sealing was a call to walk in the way of holiness. And the only way to walk in the way of holiness is to eliminate the 80 degrees of lawlessness from your being. This is the only way you can confidently cast off the works of darkness. Here again, we will spend the rest of this year and perhaps a good majority of next year analyzing these 80 degrees of lawlessness. And I will show you by the Spirit how you can eliminate these 80 degrees of lawlessness from your life once and for all. And this you must do, for Isaiah has declared, the unclean cannot walk in the way of holiness. Ergo, and as I said before, it doesn't matter if you are a physical descendant of Jacob. If you are operating in any of the degrees of lawlessness, you are not in the way of holiness. It's as simple as that. And when the enemy comes like a flood, the Most High Yahuwah will not lift a standard for you. As a matter of fact, he is going to destroy you. And that's only after he allows the enemy to ruin your life. Read your Bibles if you don't believe me. It's all in the book. This, my friends, is why Isaiah is saying, the Redeemer shall come to those turning from transgression in Jacob. That's the key. He's not coming to redeem Jacob. He is coming to redeem those who have turned away from transgression in Jacob, i.e., the remnant. And seeing as the 80 degrees of lawlessness are the source of every transgression ever committed in the history of our world, there is a premium on the knowledge Yahuwah has given me to share beginning July 1st. And so, if you're serious about surviving these last days, I would advise you to mark your calendars now. Trust me, you won't want to miss any of these lessons. Not one. To turn away from lawlessness. Now, as you can see by the timeline below, the second main event in this season of sealing is the renewed nation of Israel turns away from lawlessness. This is indeed a natural progression, for we have already established that the unclean cannot walk in the way of holiness. Therefore, those who will obtain the seal of Elohim and be elected into the renewed nation of Israel must turn away from lawlessness. Isaiah 33, 13 through 16 reads, "You who are afar off, hear what I shall do, and you who are near, know my might. Sinners in Zion shall be afraid. Trembling shall grip the defiled ones. Who of us shall dwell with the devouring fire? Who of us shall dwell with everlasting burnings? He who walks righteously and speaks what is straight. He who rejects the gain of oppressions and shuts his eyes from seeing evil. He shall inhabit the heights, strongholds of rocks be his refuge. Quite masterfully, this passage reveals that sinners within Yaakov will be afraid. Alas, trembling shall grip all who are defiled by any of the degrees of lawlessness. The question is, why? Why will sinners be afraid in Zion? Why will the defiled ones tremble? The answer is sure. It's because an evil day is coming. And unlike those who are in the way of holiness, these sinners and defiled ones will not be guarded. They will find no place of refuge. Again, the question is, why? The answer, again, is sure. It's because their lawlessness and transgressions have separated them from Elohim. And thus, although it is not his will that any should perish, the wages of sin is death in this life and in the life to come. This is a law that cannot be changed. Isaiah 59, 1 through 18 reads, Look, the hand of Yahuwah has not become too short to save, nor his ear too heavy to hear. But your sins have separated you from your Elohim, and on account of your sins, he turned his face from you to not show mercy. For your hands have been defiled with blood, and your fingers with crookedness. Your lips have spoken falsehood. Your tongue mutters unrighteousness. They trust in emptiness and speak worthlessness. They conceive trouble and bring forth wickedness. According to their deeds, so he repays. Not only does this passage confirm why Yahuwah will not guard sinners and those doing lawlessness during the great distress, it also confirms a key matter concerning those who turn away from lawlessness. Consider this if you want to live. Yahuwah has reserved an unlimited amount of mercy, grace, and favor for those who are walking in the way of holiness and guarding his commands. And all these spiritual factors and more are attributes of the seal of Elohim. Ergo, we can make a direct connection between the seal, the way of holiness, and the sovereign protection Yahuwah will provide his chosen elect during the great distress. And the one thing in this world, I say, the only thing in this world that can break this crucial life-saving association is lawlessness. You are better off late than never. Now, if you couldn't see it before, perhaps now you understand why the Spirit has led me to dedicate the second half of this year to analyzing the 80 degrees of lawlessness. Not only is it because the majority of the extended nation of Israel are being plagued by these 80 degrees, but it is also because of the lateness of the hour. My dear friends, we have progressed beyond this seasonal point of reference. To wit, we have already witnessed this major event of the sealing of these set apart ones. You may or may not have noticed, but the renewed nation of Israel has already turned away from lawlessness. 'Twas a season within a season, and now it's over. The turning point of the nation has transpired. This major event has come, and now it has gone. Now look, listen, those of you who are within the extended nation of Israel and have not made a complete turn from lawlessness are to some degree late. And lo, some of you are so far behind, you are not going to make it. For there is too much spiritual ground for you to cover, and I wish you had more time. Notwithstanding, everyone who has been chosen to be saved before the foundations of this world, you will be saved. It doesn't matter how late we are in the season, or if you somehow missed a particular marker. My dear friends, you are yet in play. Therefore, if you are to be chosen, you have no reason to be discouraged if you missed the initiation of our national departure from lawlessness. In fact, you should be encouraged for two primary reasons, which I will offer as inflection points. First and foremost, the primary reason why some within the chosen elect have not made a complete turn away from lawlessness is due to the abundance of false prophets within the extended nation of Israel. This leads to the second reason, vis-a-vis, despite this depressing reality, Yahuwah knows those who are his, and he is leading his chosen elect to his prophets, to his true messengers of the sealing. Ergo, the truth they may not have received back then, they are receiving now. This is quite simply why you're here. In line with the parable of the wedding feast, you need to put on your wedding garment. Vis-a-vis, you must put on the garments of holiness, for in doing so, you will cast off every degree of lawlessness and be free from the works and the eternal damnation of darkness. All you have to do is turn away from lawlessness and believe in the words of Yahushua Messiah. For when it comes to the seal of Elohim, you are better off late than never. Matthew 20, 1 through 16 reads, "For the kingdom of heaven is like a man, a householder, who went out early in the morning to hire workers for his vineyard. And when he had agreed with the workers for a denarius a day, he sent them into his vineyard. And he went out about the third hour and saw others standing idle in the marketplace, and said to them, You too go into the vineyard, and whatever is right, I shall give you. And they went. Having gone out again about the 6th and the 9th hour, he did likewise. And about the 11th hour, having gone out, he found others standing idle, and said to them, Why do you stand here idle all day? They said to him, Because no one hired us. He said to them, You too go into the vineyard, and whatever is right, you shall receive. And when evening came, the master of the vineyard said to his steward, Call the workers and pay them their wages, beginning with the last to the first. And when those came who were hired about the 11th hour, they each received a denarius. And when the first came, they thought they would receive more, but they too received each a silver piece. Thus the last shall be first, and the first last. For many are called, but few chosen. Now, here is the final word. It doesn't matter the hour we came. The reward we have is all the same. For that reason, I pray that you, those who Elohim has specifically brought to this ministry, are not discouraged. This may be the 11th hour, but there is still time on the clock for you to make your calling and election sure. My dear friends, you can still be chosen, and many of you will be chosen. And if that is to be you, hear me when I say it's not enough to enter the vineyard if you want to get paid. Quite the contrary, there is a lot of work you must do, and in a short amount of time. Ergo, you don't have much room for error. Rather, you must treat these final days, weeks, and months of the sealing of these set apart ones as if your life depends on it. Because the truth is, it does. Nevertheless, and I'll say it again, we have been given this chance, this final chance to obtain the seal of Elohim and live forever. And so it doesn't matter what hour you came to be sealed, you're better off late than never. Heretofore, if you fit the profile of an 11th hour worker and you have yet to obtain the seal of Elohim, Pinnacle of Holiness Ministries is what you're looking for. For Elohim has raised up this vineyard in this season for this specific purpose. And there is always room for one more. Now, here is what's next. We completed today's podcast, End Times 284, the sequence of the sealing of these set apart ones, part 1. And the next podcast is entitled End Times 286, the sequence of the sealing of these set apart ones, part 2. I'll post this podcast on Monday, June 3rd, 2024. Until then, my friends, continue to be led by the Spirit of Elohim. Continue to watch, continue to pray, continue in fasting, and most of all, continue to be focused, for the end is coming. The end is near.